Hello, I'm Lawrence Holgate, and this is Episode 8, Understanding John Stuart Mill's classic book, Utilitarianism. And if you have my book, you can follow along as I read and make comments, and if you don't have the book, well, you can get it now at Amazon.com. Just go to my website, holgatebooks.com, HOULGATE books.com, and you can get a copy instantly if you would like digital copies. We left off talking about Mill's take on the social feelings of mankind. There is a long quote at page 31 of Utilitarianism in which Mill agrees with Aristotle that human beings naturally partake of society. And he says that after a relatively short period, humans will begin to have, quote, a temporary feeling that the interests of others are their own interests. That feeling with proper cultivation soon becomes permanent. Now, this is clearly an empirical claim that Mill is making about human nature. However, social psychologists in the 20th century give obvious counterexamples that simply falsify Mill's idea that humans are naturally oriented toward each other in the ways suggested, first by Aristotle. Here's one contrary voice. I think I read this in Episode 7. Let me repeat it. We engage in acts of loyalty, moral concern, and cooperation primarily toward our inner circles, but we do so at the expense of people outside of those circles. Our altruism is not unbounded. It is parochial. In support of this phenomenon, the hormone oxytocin, long considered to play a key role in forming social bonds, has been shown to facilitate affiliation towards one's in-group, but can increase defensive aggression toward one's out-group. Other research suggests that this self-sacrificed intra-group love co-evolved with intergroup war, and that societies who most value loyalty to each other tend to be those most likely to endorse violence toward outgroups. Now, that's the end of that quote. By extension, social psychologists would also disagree with Mill that the desire to be in unity with our fellow creatures is something we naturally feel toward all humans, no matter what we know about their race, ethnicity, social class, or religion. In fairness to Mill, though, he does point out that our moral feelings are susceptible of being cultivated in almost any direction. If they're cultivated to favor one's in-group, it is still the case that people in those groups will have social feelings for one another, even if they are weaker or non-existent for those who are in outgroups. If we agree to the limited claim that humans naturally have social feelings only for persons in their in-group, then it does not follow that conscience is or can be the ultimate sanction of the greatest happiness morality. Page 33. That is, the conclusion of the preceding argument does not follow from the premises because there is no natural sentiment for the utilitarian morality. The utilitarian principle requires us to promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number, not the greatest happiness for the people in my in-group. The internal sanction of conscience may act as a powerful binding force, but it only binds us to promote the interests of people in our inner circle, not those outside the circle. Now, this doesn't mean that the desire to be in unity with our fellow creatures cannot ever extend to a desire to be in unity with all humans. It means only that this desire does not naturally so extend. If it does extend to outgroups, it's going to do this by education. You have got to be taught to identify your feelings with the good of those outside your in-group, as much as you identify your feelings with the good of those in your circle. Sidebar. Compare the findings of social psychology about the origin of moral feelings with the second and third stanzas of the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught from the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical South Pacific. Listen to these stanzas. Quote, "You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people in your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught." I leave you with that. I leave you, or I'm not going to leave you, I'm sorry. We leave the chapter in my book with that stanza. Think about that when you think about in-group and out-groups and how they care or may not care for one another. Let's turn